I schemed to get pregnant with the general's child, only to discover the neglected lady of the general's manor was the savior I had long yearned to find. So be it. For the rest of her days, she shall remain pure and untainted. I will clear the path ahead for her. My mother was a brothel's courtesan, and my father was a poor scholar. When my mother became pregnant, she refused to abort the child. Father spent all his fortune to redeem mother's freedom. He raised me until I was 3, then died in the famine. Mother died just to get me a bowl of watery porridge. I survived until 15 by begging everywhere. But who would marry an orphaned beggar? So I washed my face clean and slipped into the general's tent. I took after my mother, exceptionally beautiful. On lonely military campaigns, I deliberately seduced him, and Songyan was utterly defenseless against it. He kept me hidden by his side, indulging with me night after night. On the march back to the imperial capital, I became pregnant. Seeing the delight on his face, I knew I would never have to wander aimlessly for the rest of my life. Having won the battle, Songyan returned in triumph, and naturally, everyone in the general's estate came out to welcome him. Yet the general's primary wife was nowhere to be seen. I heard she and Songyan were childhood sweethearts before marrying. Yet at least 4 or 5 concubines were here to welcome him. Rumor had it that her maid reported her for plotting to harm concubine Liu's child. So the old madame confined her to her quarters, waiting for Songyan to return and deal with her. Standing beside Songyan, I looked at concubine Liu, who was also pregnant. They said she conceived the night before Songyan left for the battlefield. Concubine Liu was named Liu Pianpian. At this moment, she was standing by Mother Song's side, intimately holding Mother Song's arm. Liu Pianpian had delicate features, with a sharp, fierce look in her eyes. Her protruding belly lent her a touch of softness, which tempered the calculating expression on her face. When our eyes met, I easily caught the fleeting contempt in her gaze. We both used schemes to snatch someone else's husband, so what right did she have to look down on me? With that single glance, a grudge was forged between us.
Mother, a Yao is carrying my child. I wish to take her into the manor as a concubine.
These were the very first words Songyan said, upon seeing his mother.
Since the young lady is carrying your child, we must naturally give her proper status.
Madame Song took my hand, her rough, dry fingertips rubbing against the back of it, making me feel utterly uncomfortable. Liu Pianpian's expression had already changed. The one in her belly was Songyan's first child, and the one in mine was the second. Because of this, we became rivals. She stared intently at my belly, blinking slowly. Undoubtedly, scheming something. I pulled my clothes tighter around myself. Songyan thought I was cold. He unfastened his own cloak and wrapped it around me. This simple gesture, yet caused the expressions of everyone around to change. Liu Pianpian tried her best to maintain her composure, contorting her pretty face into a twisted grimace. I looked away. They say during pregnancy, the more you look at someone, your child will grow up to resemble.
Yanner, now that you have returned, go take a look at that criminal woman in the manor. She is truly, utterly lawless, committing such a heinous deed.
Madame Song's gaze drifted over me intentionally or not. I knew this was her subtle warning. I lowered my gaze, putting on an obedient appearance. This general's manor is truly grand beyond measure, with ponds, pavilions, and flower beds all within, truly opening my eyes. The general's wife was locked away in a dilapidated courtyard in the farthest corner, utterly out of place in this magnificent estate, yet standing distinctly apart. Madame Song found it bad luck and didn't come, yet instructed me to follow Songyan. Songyan raised his hand to push open the door, then rubbed the dust off his fingertips in disgust.
Mu Ting, I misjudged you. I never thought you were this kind of person.
Hearing Song Yan's voice, the woman sitting on the stone bench slowly raised her eyes, her gaze filled with desolation. The general's wife was a classic Jiangyan beauty, with smoky eyebrows and affectionate eyes, a delicate sight that would evoke pity in anyone. Too bad, she loved the wrong man. I lamented silently in my heart. After years of marriage, Song Yan didn't even ask for her explanation when he walked in, already convicting her on the spot. The deep love of their youth amounted to nothing more than this. Men are all like this. When you love him, he treats you like dirt. When you don't love him, he would tear his own heart and lungs out for you instead. A little maid rushed out, kneeled before Songyan, and kowtowed, crying out for justice.
General, Madam is innocent. General, please see the truth.
Guizhu told us the details herself. Could she have falsely accused you? Guizhu, what are you standing there for? Drag her away and slap her mouth.
From behind her walked out a maid dressed in sprout green, and raised her hand to deliver a hard slap. One look at your face, and I know you're a troublemaker.
The young mistress has treated you so well. Do you have a heart at all?
What a jinx.
Liu Pianpian caressed her baby bump and looked away. Doing such wicked things, aren't you afraid retribution will fall upon your own child?
Mu Ting, what else do you have to say for yourself?
Song Yan walked up to the general's wife. She did not even raise her head, only looking with heartache at the maid lying on the ground.
Since you have committed these offenses, the household affairs will now be handed over to Pianpian. Out of consideration for our past affection, I sentence you to 30 strikes with the rod, and to remain confined to this courtyard until a Yao gives birth. Do you have any objections?
Song Yan asked. The general's wife looked up at me, showing no anger, nor jealousy. Clearly, she had long stopped caring about how many women he brings into the household. To be honest, I couldn't believe a woman with such kind and gentle features would harm the child in my womb. Yet, she and I are neither kin nor friend, and there was no need for me to wade into these muddy waters. 2 guards hauled Mu Ting up, and as my gaze shifted downward, a carved white jade pendant hung at her waist, reflecting in my eyes. Its intricate pattern was identical to the one in my memory, as if struck by lightning. I couldn't stop trembling all over. I couldn't be mistaken. My lady was the savior I had longed for half my life.
Yao, are you all right?
Song Yan quickly supported me. I huddled in his arms, gasping for breath, only then, managing to recover. General, it is your son protesting. He is only 3 months along, and he can't bear to see bloodshed. Why don't we spare the 30 strikes of the rod? Let's consider it accumulating merit for our child. From an angle no one else could see, I took Song Yan's hand and drew circles on his palm. He seemed to recall something, and his entire body instantly tensed up. Song Yan held me in his arms, coughed softly twice, and said unnaturally,
Since Gu Yao has said so, the 30 cane strikes will be spared. You guilty woman had better behave and stay right here. Do not come out to harm others again.
My lady had already given up hope, yet she was still stung pale by Song Yan's words. I wanted so badly to hug her, but I couldn't. I took a deep look at her, and was led away in Song Yan's embrace. I turned my head to glance at Liu Pianpian's face. She glared fiercely at me, seemingly resenting me for stealing her man. Yet, what goes around comes around. At dinner, Song Yan pulled me to sit beside him. The smile vanished from Liu Pianpian's eyes. I clearly saw her secretly pinch Kueju. Kueju hurriedly stepped forward and placed a chicken leg into Song Yan's bowl, as if casually, brushing against Song Yan's hand on the bowl's rim.
Please enjoy the food, General.
Resting my chin on my hand, I watched the exquisitely dressed Kueju with a faint smile. Clearly, just a maid, yet dressed up like a mistress. Liu Pianpian's intention was merely to take advantage of my pregnancy, to push Kueju to Song Yan to share his favor. Yet, as long as I still have this face, my favor will never fade. I covered my mouth and pretended to gag, and Song Yan immediately stroked my back, his face full of concern. I shook my head, acting weak and coquettish toward Song Yan, saying the chicken was too dry and tasted terrible. Song Yan hurriedly took the chicken leg from his bowl and put it in mine. I took a bite and pushed the chicken leg back. Song Yan didn't mind it at all. I glanced up at Kueju, deliberately adding a provocative look in my eyes. Seeing Kueju's smiling face contorted with jealousy, I couldn't help but burst into laughter. Song Yan looked up at me in confusion, so I leaned right into his arms. This maid's beady little eyes is quite amusing. Kueju had a pure and innocent look, with the delicate charm of a girl next door. It is just that her eyes are a bit small, though her other features are petite as well, so it actually looks quite balanced. She also considered herself quite pretty, which was why she dared to betray her master for her own gain. Wasn't it all just to climb into his bed one day and become a mistress? Now that I've singled out her eyes, to make a laughing stock of her, it will completely crush her hopes. With this laugh of mine, even if Song Yan had any such ideas, he wouldn't be able to bring himself to do it. Kueju glared fiercely at me and ran off in tears. She truly is a servant spoiled by her former mistress, unable to bear even the slightest grievance. I felt utterly exhilarated, yet I still knitted my brows and leaned against Song Yan's chest, saying with a face full of self-blame that it was Gu Yao's fault for ruining such a fine meal, and making Sister Liu unhappy.
She is merely a servant. Don't upset yourself over this.
Song Yan squeezed my hand and comforted me, then turned with a cold face to warn Liu Pianpian.
Your maid. She sure has quite the temper.
Seeing Liu Pianpian grit her teeth in fury, looking as if she wished to tear me apart, I curled my lips slightly. My goal was achieved. I pushed the bowl in front of me away, saying I was full and wanted to take a walk to digest the food. Song Yan wanted to accompany me. I pushed his hand away, telling him to attend to his official duties, or he would have another headache the next day after staying up late. Seeing Song Yan look at me with a face full of gratitude, I suppressed the amusement in my heart, raised my hand, and gently patted his cheek. I strolled around the general's estate, and on the way to the side courtyard, I ran into a servant carrying a food container, presumably on their way to deliver meals to Madam. The servant bowed to me,
My lord, lest you catch any bad luck.
and urged me to keep away. How could I possibly mind the bad luck? Hand me the food box in a bit. I'll leave it outside Madam's door along the way. I waved my hand, just trying to do him a favor. Yet, seeing the servant look uneasy and reluctant to come forward, I seemed to realize something. Open the food box. Let me see. I had the servant beside me block his path. While I walked over to his side, I pulled off the food box lid in one swift motion, and a swarm of long-trapped green-eyed flies rushed out, accompanied by a foul stench hitting me straight in the face, so sickening that I covered my mouth and gagged repeatedly. I've lived in comfort for so long that I've grown increasingly delicate. I put the lid back on. Who ordered you to do this? How dare you mistreat your master?
Have mercy, master. I only deliver the food. I don't know anything.
I had merely knitted my brows, yet he fell to his knees with a thud, shivering like a leaf. I already knew that in his master's eyes he was just a worthless life, meant to take the blame once the deed was exposed. Seeing him terrified to this extent, I waved my hand and let him leave. If he feared death so much, why wasn't he smarter when taking orders? I bent down to pick up the food box. The only one bold enough to act like this was none other than concubine Liu. I went to the kitchen, hoping to find something clean to take to the madam. However, I was told the dinner hour had passed, and only a few white flour buns remained. White buns were good enough. They could stave off hunger. I packed a few buns and walked toward the madam's courtyard. The warm candlelight by the doorway bathed two figures. The madam was tending to her maid's injuries. Her lovely face shimmered softly in the red-tinted light. The scene before me overlapped with one from 10 years ago. Back when I was beaten black and blue fighting beggars for scraps, someone had applied medicine to my wounds just like this. Her single silver ingot helped me survive the grief of losing my mother and carried me through my darkest days. I knocked on the door. The maid in pink held the madam's hand, stood up, and walked to the door. When she saw me, her brow furrowed tight, and she set her hands on her hips, just like a mother beast protecting her cub.
What are you here for? Our madam has nothing left. How is she worth all your scheming to harm her?
I gently handed forward the food box. The kitchen didn't. Before I could finish speaking, I saw the little maid wave her hand, knocking the food box right out of my grasp. The lid flew off as it crashed down, and steaming white flour buns tumbled out, covered in dirt.
Our concubine came with good intentions to bring you food. You're going way too far. I'm going to tell the general.
The maid attending to me shouted angrily. The maid in pink seemed frightened. She knew that if Song Yan found out about this, Madame would be punished again. That is enough, Singer. I stopped my maid, knelt down, and looked at the steamed buns on the ground with heartache. They were quite large and made of fine flour. During a famine, they could save a life. If I had had these buns back then, perhaps I would still have my parents to protect me. I cupped the steamed bun in my hands, opening my mouth to take a bite, only to be stopped by a pair of slender, fair hands. I looked up, and the madam's face was reflected in my eyes. Perhaps pregnancy had made me sentimental. All the grievances I had suffered over the years surged into my heart, and tears poured continuously from my eyes, dripping onto Madam's hands. She seemed somewhat flustered. She wiped my tears in a fluster.
This steamed bun is a bit dirty, but it is much better than the rice. Hong Yu, apologized to concubine Gu at once.
The little maid was also frightened, and hastily apologized. I shook my head. It is a good thing that the little maid is so alert. I saw Madame blow the dust off the steamed bun, and was about to put it in her mouth. I quickly stopped her. I'll go to the kitchen to fetch something clean for you, sister. You grew up in the lap of luxury, my lady. What if you get sick from eating something dirty?
I've even eaten spoiled rice. Why would I fear this?
Madame took a bite of the steamed bun, and smiled at me. Feeling shy, I was. Madame pulled me into the room. I looked at the jade pendant at Madame's waist. Sister, I think I've seen the jade pendant at your waist before.
Do you mean you've seen me before?
The madam curled her lips into a smile, revealing two lovely dimples at the corners of her mouth. She said the jade pendant at her waist was given to her by her grandmother, and that it was the only one of its kind in this world. I couldn't take in anything else, she said. I had finally found my benefactor. Every night, I would secretly bring some food to the madam. These past days, Madame's face was no longer as sunken as before, looking much fuller. I told Xinger to wait to the side, while I walked up the bridge alone. As I casually tossed fish food into the pond, looking at the green figure reflected in the water, I couldn't help but curl my lips into a smile. I stepped closer to the edge of the pond, and deliberately leaned forward to look at the little fish with the black spot on its head, listening to the footsteps approaching from afar. A sudden force struck me from behind. I plunged headlong into the pond, submerged beneath the water. Overwhelming pond water surged toward me, and my heavy clothes soaked through, dragging my entire body downward. An intense sensation of suffocation overtook me.
Samani, help, help.
Hearing Shinger's desperate screams, I thrashed wildly in the water. Freezing pond water rushed into my nose and throat, stabbing through all my internal organs, feeling as if they were being pierced by icicles. Even breathing became an impossible luxury. I could feel my body sinking deeper and deeper, the silt at the pond's bottom wrapped around my ankles, like freezing hands dragging me down into the darkness. Being 3 months pregnant already left me fragile, and after choking on the water, a dull, dragging pain came from my lower abdomen. My heart sank. I desperately raised my hands and slapped at the water, with only one thought in mind, the child. Nothing could happen to it. My lady was still waiting for me to protect her. Shinger's cries grew closer and closer, along with that intentionally lowered voice, which was still recognizable. Squinting my eyes blurred by pond water, I faintly saw Kueju standing by the stone railing at the pond's edge, her figure hiding behind the rockery, her fingers still pinching a cobblestone used to push me. The moss on that stone was identical to what was scraped onto the back of my hand. Just as my consciousness was fading, and my vision began to darken, a pair of strong arms slipped under my armpits and hauled me out of the freezing pond water. leaning in that person's embrace. I coughed up mouthfuls of water, even retching up the sour bile from my stomach, choking until tears streamed down my face. Looking up, I saw it was Song Yan. Behind him followed Liu Pianpian, who had come to watch the spectacle. As soon as Liu Pianpian saw me soaked through, and in such a wretched state, she immediately rushed forward wanting to support me, saying,
Sister Gu Yao, what happened to you? How did you fall into the water out of nowhere? Quick, help her back to the room to warm up. Don't let her catch a chill and hurt the child.
Just as her hand touched my arm, I deliberately flinched, shrinking into Song Yan's embrace, my voice faint as a mosquito's hum. General, I'm so cold. Someone pushed me. Song Yan immediately swept me up in his arms and glared fiercely at the surrounding servants.
Are you all dead? Seeing the concubine fall into the water, and none of you knew to save her.
Then he turned to look at Liu Pianpian, his tone laced with impatience.
There is nothing for you to do here. Go back.
Liu Pianpian's face instantly paled a bit, a flicker of malice crossing her eyes.
Then I'll have the servants prepare ginger soup to ward off sister's chill.
Yet she quickly concealed it. Only murmuring softly, Song Yan carried me back to the room. Singar had already ordered hot water to be boiled and brought in charcoal braziers. The maidservants bustled about in a flurry, changing me into a clean brocade jacket and wrapping me in thick cotton quilts, and brought over piping hot ginger soup. After taking 2 sips, my stomach finally felt a bit warmer, and the dull ache in my lower abdomen eased slightly. Yet, I was still trembling all over, not from the cold, but from the suffocating terror of that moment, and my deep hatred for Gu Yao and Liu Pianpian. Song Yan sat by the bedside, tightly clasping my hand, his face filled with heartache.
Gu Yao, who on earth pushed you? Tell me, and I certainly won't let them off lightly.
I looked up at him through tear-filled eyes, my fingers trembling slightly, yet deliberately withheld Gu Yao's name. I was only watching the fish then, so I didn't see clearly who it was. I only felt a forceful shove from behind, looking like the figure of a woman, dressed in green. Among the maidservants in the manor, the one wearing sprout green clothes, and I was carrying the general's child, was only Gu Yao. Song Yan's face darkened instantly, fury surging in his eyes. He was fiercely protective of his own, let alone the fact that I was carrying his child. Now that something like this had happened, how could he let it slide? He immediately called out for the housekeeper.
Housekeeper, bring Auntie Lu's maid, Gu Yao, here.
The housekeeper did not dare to delay, and hurried off to comply. In less time than it takes to burn half an incense stick, Gu Yao was dragged in. Her clothes were slightly disheveled, and panic was written all over her face. As soon as she entered, she fell to her knees with a thud.
General, spare my life. Auntie, spare my life. This servant did not push the auntie. I truly did not.
If not you, then who? In this manor, only you wear ivory green clothes.
Gu Yao kowtowed desperately, her forehead hitting the bluestone floor so hard. Blood soon began to seep out.
General, someone is framing me. It is madam, who is confined to the side courtyard. She resents that auntie pleaded to spare her from the caning, and feeling bitter, she had sister Hong Yu lure this servant to the pond.
Gu Yao, on the ground, wept as she defended herself.
And then intentionally pushed the concubine into the water just to frame me.
How dare she still try to implicate madam? A surge of anger instantly welled up inside me. I propped myself up to sit, clutching my lower abdomen, coughed twice, and looked at Gu Yao with a pale face. How can you be so vicious? Madam is confined to the side courtyard and cannot step out at all. How could she go to the pond and push me? Besides, Madam has a gentle nature. How could she do such a thing? You clearly have a guilty conscience, and are trying to slander Madam.
I didn't. It was Madam. She told me to go by the pond. She said she had something to tell me. But when I got there, I saw Auntie falling into the water. Just as I was about to call for help, the steward's men seized me and brought me here. General, you must believe me.
Liu Pianpian walked in, carrying ginger soup. And seeing the scene, she immediately knelt before Song Yan and wept, saying,
Gu Yao has served me for so long. Though she is rash by nature, she would never dare commit such an outrageous act. Could there truly be some misunderstanding? Why not spare her just this once? For the sake of her service to me.
How was this pleading for mercy? She was clearly adding fuel to the fire. Song Yan was already suspicious of Gu Yao, and her defending her like this only made Song Yan think she was withholding what she knew. I gently tugged at Song Yan's sleeve, my voice soft and frail. General, I also find this matter suspicious. Gu Yao is merely a maidservant. If no one instigated her, how would she dare push me so easily? After all, I am carrying the general's child. Even with immense audacity, she wouldn't dare do this. I stopped right there with my words. Astute as Song Yan was, he instantly understood what I meant. He looked coldly at Liu Pianpian, the chill in his eyes almost freezing everyone in the room.
It seems unless you are given a taste of suffering, you won't speak the truth.
With that, he said to the steward,
Drag her out, give her 50 strokes with the staff. Let us see if she confesses or not.
Liu Pianpian stood aside, her fingers wringing her handkerchief tightly, her face pale as paper, no longer able to hide the panic in her eyes. Leaning against Song Yan's chest, I curled my lips into a barely perceptible smile. This was only the beginning. What you owe the madam, and what you owe me, I will claim back bit by bit. After the 50 strokes were completed, Kueju was dragged back in, covered in bruises and wounds, her breath weak as a thread, yet she still gritted her teeth, claiming she was wronged. I had long expected she would not confess easily. After all, Liu Pianpian had promised her status, and she was still holding on to a glimmer of hope. I cast a glance at Xing'er. Xing'er understood implicitly, turned around and stepped out. A moment later, she brought in a bowl of pitch, black herbal decoction.
This is a mind-clearing soup the concubine had brewed. Drink it and think carefully. If you dare lie again, it won't be as simple as just 50 strokes.
This was hardly any mind-clearing soup. It was merely brewed from herbs that I had Xing'er fetch from the pharmacy to induce delirium. Although it was not lethal, it could make someone babble incoherently. Already beaten half to death, how could she withstand the effects of such herbs? Not long after drinking it, her eyes began to lose focus, and she started muttering nonsense under her breath. Everyone leaned in closer to listen, only to hear him crying out intermittently.
Auntie, you promised me, once concubine Gu lost her child, you would make me a concubine. You told me to push her. You said, as long as concubine Gu is gone, the general would favor only you and the madam. You told me to frame the madam for harming your child.
Every single word lashed across Liu Pianpian like a whip. Liu Pianpian turned deathly pale, stepping back repeatedly, shaking her head.
You lie. I didn't, master. Stop talking nonsense.
I'm not talking nonsense. You gave me silver. You gave me jewelry. It really was you who made me do this. You even said, when you bore a son, you'd make me a side concubine.
Song Yan's face was as dark as soot. He glared intently at Liu Pianpian. The affection in his eyes completely vanished, leaving only cold fury and disappointment. He never could have imagined that his favored concubine Liu could be so venomous. Not only scheming to frame the madam, but even daring to attack me while I carried his child.
Liu Pianpian.
Song Yan's voice was as cold as ice.
What else do you have to say?
Laced with a bone-chilling frost, Liu Pianpian slumped to the floor, her face ashen as death, unable to utter a single word. She knew that this time she was utterly ruined. After drinking the medicine, in a state of utter confusion, Kueju rambled on endlessly until his voice finally faded, and he collapsed stiffly onto the ground. The manor servants dragged his body out and took it to the mass grave, discarded like a ragged piece of cloth, unnoticed and uncared for. Until his death, he believed Liu Pianpian would save him. Little did he know that in Liu Pianpian's eyes, he was merely a disposable pawn. I said nothing, only cowered trembling in Song Yan's embrace, burying my head in the crook of his neck, pretending to be thoroughly frightened. This was the general's manner, and Song Yan was a general wielding military power. There was no need for me to say more. These words would naturally reach his ears, and even reach the old madam's ears. All I needed to do was provide him with the latter, giving him a justified reason to punish Liu Pianpian, and a justified reason to release the madam from the side courtyard. After a long silence, I finally looked up, gazing at Song Yan with red-rimmed eyes. I choked back a sob and said, "General, I know I shouldn't make requests, but seeing the madam locked away in the side courtyard truly breaks my heart. The madam has such a gentle nature. She must have been framed by Aunt Liu. Besides, the madam resembles my late elder sister so much. Whenever I see her, it feels like seeing my sister, General. Could you please release the madam? I want my sister to keep me company, so I have someone to talk to." In truth, I never had an elder sister. Song Yan knew this as well. He had investigated my background before and knew my parents were dead, and that I was all alone. Yet, he did not point it out. He simply looked at me in silence, a flicker of complex emotion in his eyes. Perhaps he already realized his mistake, knowing the madam had been wronged. He was merely constrained by his pride and by the old madam, making it difficult to simply relent. And these words of mine happened to give him a graceful way out. After a moment of silence, Song Yan gently stroked my head and sighed.
Very well, for your sake. I shall release her then. However, she may only move back to her own courtyard. She is not to manage any household affairs for now.
I knew this was already the greatest concession Song Yan could make. I nodded hurriedly. and leaned into his embrace, heaving a sigh of relief. In my heart, madam, you can finally leave that dilapidated, detached courtyard. Madam was released and moved back to her original Tinglan courtyard. When she came to thank me, her gaze seemed to hold a hint of reproach. I understood the meaning behind her eyes. She seemed to know that I fell into the water intentionally, framed Gu Yao on purpose, and deliberately caused Liu Pianpian to fall from grace. But what did that matter? The child was safe. I had achieved my goal, and she had regained her freedom. I stroked my lower abdomen. My child. I was apologizing to the unborn child in my womb. Mother did this to repay a debt of gratitude. I have wronged you. That very night, I felt a burning fever all over my body, and my throat was parched. My eyelids felt as if they were glued shut, heavy as lead, and I could not open them no matter what. Presumably, falling into the water during the day had chilled me, and the cold had invaded my body. Xinger paced anxiously and hurried to fetch a physician, yet the estate's physician had been summoned away by Liu Pianpian, so no one could be brought over right away. In my dazed state, I felt someone help me up. A gentle, warm hand supported my back and brought a cup of warm water to my lips, feeding it to me bit by bit. The water carried a faint taste of licorice. It had likely been brewed specially to dispel the cold. After finishing the water, I was gently laid back onto the bed. Someone covered me with a thick quilt, tucking me in snugly and securely, and even placed a foot warmer near my feet. I could feel someone sitting by the bedside, gently touching my forehead. The warmth of those fingertips felt just like when the madam used to apply medicine on me as a child. I wanted to open my eyes to see who it was, but my eyelids felt terribly heavy. I could only force open a narrow slit, and caught sight of a plain figure sitting beside the candlelight, quietly watching over me. It was the madam. It had to be her. In my daze, I drifted off to sleep. I broke into a heavy sweat, and the burning heat in my body gradually subsided. When I opened my eyes again, it was already daylight. Songyan was watching over me. By the bedside, his eyes bloodshot. He must have stayed by my side all night. Where is madam? The first thing I asked about was the madam. About me waking up and asking for the madam right away. Songyan seemed a bit displeased. His brows knitted slightly, and his tone carried a hint of jealousy.
You just woke up. Yet, instead of thinking of me, you think of someone else first.
Knowing he was upset, I quickly raised my hand to smooth his furrowed brow. Please don't be upset, General, I said softly. I just feel that, if it weren't for madam yesterday, my cold wouldn't have recovered so quickly. Opening my eyes and seeing you right away makes Gu Yao so very happy. To stay by my side. You didn't sleep all night, and you've even got dark circles under your eyes. As I spoke, I reached out and gently pinched his cheek. Only then did Songyan's expression soften a bit, holding my hand and kissing it softly against his lips.
As long as you know.
I leaned against his chest, yet caught a faint scent of sweet osmanthus on him. It was the scent of the scented powder Liu Pianpian often wore, crisp and clear, laced with a cloying sweetness. Presumably, in the breaks between watching over me last night, he must have visited Liu Pianpian. I veiled the mockery in my eyes. I sneered inwardly. Songyan, oh Songyan, you truly are heartless and fickle. Here I am, lying sick in bed, while you rush off to comfort your concubine Liu.
Madam watched over you all night, leaving only at dawn. I told her to go and get some rest.
Hearing my soothing words, Songyan's mood improved, and he finally answered my question. So it really was the madam who stayed by my side all night. A warmth filled my heart, yet recalling the osmanthus scent on Songyan, an even deeper chill crept in. How could he ever deserve such a wonderful person? The madam is so gentle, kind, and well-educated, managing the household for him, guarding the general's manor for him. Yet, this is how he treats her, doting on venomous, wicked women instead. He is truly blind. Gu Yao had already lost her life, and Liu Pianpian would naturally face punishment as well. Though Songyan did not banish her to a remote courtyard, he stripped her of the authority to manage household affairs, confining her to her own courtyard, forbidden from coming and going at will. Moreover, Liu Pianpian's pregnancy was already well along, her body heavy and cumbersome, making her unfit to manage household affairs anyway. After this incident, her status in the manor plummeted, and her former glory was completely gone. I had foreseen all of this long ago. And naturally, Liu Pianpian could anticipate it too. She would never accept losing power like this, and would surely try every possible means to take revenge. And the targets of her revenge would undoubtedly be the madam and me. A few days later, the madam left the courtyard. According to the manor's custom, she was to reward the servants with some pastries, to dispel bad luck. Being gentle-natured, the madam had the kitchen prepare plenty of osmanthus and peach blossom cakes, to share among the masters and servants of the manor. When it was Liu Pianpian's turn, her maid came to collect the pastries. The madam didn't think much of it, and had Hongyu pack a full box to hand over to her. Yet when I received the osmanthus pastry the madam rewarded me with, my nose caught a faint trace of an almost imperceptible strange scent. That fragrance mingled with the sweet osmanthus aroma, and without sniffing closely, one could never tell it was the smell of saffron. Saffron is cold in nature. If a pregnant woman consumes it, at best it threatens her pregnancy, and at worst, harm the unborn child. How could Liu Pianpian be so vicious? She even dared to tamper with pastries bestowed by the madam. She must intend to pin the blame for harming her child onto the madam, claiming the madam holds a grudge against her, and deliberately laced the pastries with saffron to harm her. Clutching that piece of sweet osmanthus pastry, my fingertips trembled slightly, and the hatred in my heart almost overflowed. Since she resorted to such unscrupulous means, trying to frame Madame, I could help him along, and make him pay for his deeds. Calmly, I set the osmanthus pastry aside, and gave Singer a meaningful look, having her discreetly stow this box of pastries away, to serve as evidence. Afterward, I sent someone to Liu Pianpian's courtyard under the guise of paying a visit, while secretly slipping a small packet of saffron, and secretly placed it in the drawer of her dressing table. That drawer was where she usually kept her jewelry and scented powders. She wouldn't easily let anyone touch it, yet it was also the easiest place to find it. After doing all this, I changed into clean clothes, and sat by the window, quietly waiting for the moment everything would be exposed. Liu Pianpian had calculated everything. Little did she know, I had already laid an inescapable trap, just waiting for her to walk right into it. Around the time the sun was setting, from Liu Pianpian's courtyard came a maid's sudden, heart-wrenching scream. The scream was shrill and piercing, echoing across most of the general's manor. A cold sneer tugged at the corners of my mouth, knowing the show had begun. I quietly opened the window and looked toward Liu Pianpian's courtyard. I saw maidservants carrying basin after basin of bloody water out of the courtyard. The bloody water was dazzlingly red, making one shudder at the sight. Without a second thought, one knew Liu Pianpian had harmed her pregnancy. Sure enough, before long, a servant came to report that concubine Liu ate the osmanthus pastries gifted by the madam, which triggered pregnancy complications, and lost the child. It was a fully formed male fetus. With my fingers raised slightly, I rubbed the freshly applied red polish on my nails. The bright red shade was as glaring as the blood flowing from Liu Pianpian's courtyard. Liu Pianpian was already weak to begin with, and after suffering this ordeal, with her body having endured such brutal torment, it would likely be difficult for her to conceive again in the future. She brought this entirely upon herself. She has no one else to blame. When Liu Pianpian woke up, she wept and threw a fit, making a scene in the courtyard, insisting that madam had harmed her baby. When Song Yan rushed over upon hearing the news, Liu Pianpian threw herself into his arms at once, crying her heart out.
General, you must seek justice for our unborn child. It was Mu Ting. Mu Ting killed our child. She resented me for carrying your baby. So she put saffron in the osmanthus pastries, causing me to lose my baby. General, you must bring me justice.
Song Yan held her in his arms, clasping her hand while softly comforting her. Yet a hint of hesitation lingered in his eyes. After the incident with Kueju, he no longer believed Liu Pianpian's words as blindly and completely as he once had, standing beside madam. I lowered my gaze, feigning a look full of guilt and remorse. Placing a hand gently over my swollen belly, I choked back a sob and said, "It is all my fault. If I hadn't suggested yesterday that madam reward everyone with pastries, this wouldn't have happened. Harming someone else's child. I feel truly uneasy in my heart. I fear retribution will fall upon me." My words seemed self-reproachful, but were actually meant to remind Song Yan. Madam was naturally gentle, tempered, and had just been released from the side courtyard. Why would she do such a thing at a critical moment like this? Moreover, the pastries were made in the estate's kitchen. Madam never even handled them. How could she have added saffron to them?
It was her. It was definitely her. She harmed my son.
Seeing Song Yan hesitate, Liu Pianpian immediately pointed at madam, her eyes filled with venomous hatred.
It must be her. She resents me for replacing her in managing the household affairs, and resents the general's favor toward me, so she committed this vicious deed. General, please seek justice for me. Punish her for her crime.
Madam is kind by nature. She would never do such a thing. Looking at Liu Pianpian's hysterical appearance, I sneered inwardly. Yet outwardly, I pretended to defend madam, supporting my body as I tried to kneel on the ground, to beg Song Yan to investigate clearly. However, being 3 months pregnant, though my belly was not prominent, it was showing slightly. This kneel proved rather difficult. My body swayed, and I nearly fell. Seeing me like this, Song Yan immediately made a move to rise, wanting to support me, only to have his hand tightly clung to by Liu Pianpian.
General, you cannot protect her. She harmed our child. How can you protect her?
Madam acted quickly, stepping forward to help me up, gently patting my back. To soothe me, her back was straight, without the slightest panic on her face, leaving only complete detachment. It was the calm of a heart that had died of despair. After going through so much, she no longer cared whether Song Yan believed her or not, nor did she care about anything in this general's manor anymore.
General concubine Liu has just lost her child. Her body is weak, and her emotions are unstable. I hope you will not hold it against her.
My lady's voice was calm and flat, devoid of any emotion.
As for the osmanthus cakes, the pastries were made by the kitchen and distributed by Hong Yu and the estate servants. I never once touched them. How could I have harmed anyone? If concubine Liu does not believe me, she can send someone to investigate the kitchen, interrogate the cook who made the pastries that day, and question the servants who distributed them.
You're still making excuses.
Liu Pianpian's piercing screech hurt our eardrums and made Song Yan furrow his brows.
I will investigate this as soon as possible and give you an explanation.
Song Yan finally pushed Liu Pianpian away and stood up, his tone tinged with exhaustion, perhaps feeling guilty for having wronged my lady before. This time, he didn't condemn her right away, choosing instead to investigate before making a judgment. Seeing that Song Yan refused to punish my lady immediately, Liu Pianpian grew even more infuriated. Just as she was about to speak again, the main doors were violently pushed open, with prayer beads still wrapped around her hand. The old dowager stormed in furiously, followed by several elder maids. As soon as the old dowager entered, she saw Liu Pianpian weeping pitifully, then glanced at the bloody water on the floor, and immediately understood what had happened. Without a second word, she marched straight up to my lady and raised her hand to deliver a slap.
You heartless woman.
The old dowager pointed at my lady's nose and berated loudly.
Just because you cannot bear children, you can't stand seeing others have them. You actually had the heart to kill Pianpian's unborn son. How did my Song family ever marry a woman like you into our house? What sin have I committed to have a daughter-in-law like you send her to the authorities, turn her over to the officials, let the magistrate punish her?
It broke my heart to see this, and I could no longer hold back from stepping in front of Madam to shield her, crying out to the old Madam, "Mother, if you want to hit someone, hit this daughter-in-law instead." Just as the old Madam's hand was about to strike my shoulder, Song Yan caught her wrist.
Mother, what are you doing? My household affairs need not trouble you. I will handle this myself.
Song Yan now assumed the full authority of a general, radiating the formidable aura forged on the battlefield. Barked at by him like this, the old madam dared not say another word. She merely trembled with rage, glaring at Madam with clenched teeth and bitter resentment, before finally letting out a cold snort and storming off with a flick of her sleeves. I had long prepared everything. That saffron was originally bought from outside by Liu Pianpian herself through someone else. In the Manor's accounting office, there were still records of her saffron purchase, and the packet of saffron I had placed in her vanity was identical to the one she had bought. If Song Yan were to investigate, the trail would only lead back to her. Yet I never in my wildest dreams expected that Liu Pianpian's uncle was none other than the Prime Minister of the court. Prime Minister Liu already had some ties with Song Yan, and having a day off recently, he came to visit the general's manor. The news of Liu Pianpian losing her child quickly reached Prime Minister Liu's ears. That day, Prime Minister Liu merely took a stroll around the general's manor, simply patted Song Yan on the shoulder, and said,
"Worthy nephew, domestic matters must be handled properly. Do not break the heart of an old friend,"
and then departed. Yet, it was this single sentence that caused a complete reversal in Song Yan's attitude. Prime Minister Liu wielded immense power in the imperial court. Song Yan was eager to climb the ranks, so he could not curry favor with Prime Minister Liu fast enough, let alone dare to offend him. Liu Pianpian was Prime Minister Liu's biological niece. Now that Prime Minister Liu had spoken, even if Song Yan knew Liu Pianpian was at fault, he could only pin the blame entirely on Madame. To give Prime Minister Liu an explanation, that very night, Madame was locked away in the woodshed by Song Yan. The woodshed was dark and damp, drafty from all sides, without even a decent bed, leaving only a pile of dry straw. Madame was already frail, and had just been slapped by the old Madame. How could she endure such torment? What chilled my heart even more was that Song Yan actually brought a whip, claiming he would avenge his unborn child and personally punish Madame. Inside the woodshed, Song Yan stood before Madame with a horsewhip in hand. Madame knelt on the dry straw, her back turned toward him.
"Mu Ting, you harmed my child. Today, I shall seek justice for him."
Song Yan's voice was frigid, devoid of any warmth. As soon as the words left his mouth, the horsewhip lashed down, carrying the sharp whistling of the wind, and struck viciously across Madame's back. With a loud crack, Madame's clothes were instantly torn open, revealing the fair skin underneath. A bright red welt immediately appeared on her skin. Madame's body trembled, yet she did not let out a single groan, only biting her lip tightly, swallowing all the agony inside. 1 lash, 2 lashes, 3 lashes. The whip fell upon Madame's back again and again. The bloody welts multiplied, growing deeper and deeper, staining the floor red. Her clothes also stained the straw on the ground red. standing by the side. Unable to bear the sight, I looked away. Tightly clutching my belly, I looked at Song Yan's hideous face, watching him swing the horsewhip again and again, with only one thought in my mind. Acting like this, he does not deserve to be called human at all. A man like this is not worthy of Madame's love. Nor is he worthy of everything in the general's estate. He is nothing but an ungrateful, fawning, snobbish villain. Seeing Madame prostrate on the ground, her gaze unfocused, her body swaying, on the verge of collapse, I could no longer care about anything else, and rushed forward in a panic. General, stop. Madame cannot bear this. Please stop, General. Song Yan raised his whip again, and though he heard my cry, he failed to pull back in time. The whip grazed my brow, leaving a bloody slash behind. It stung with a burning pain. Blood trickled down from my brow, dripping onto my cheek, and then onto my lady's hand. Looking at the blood on my face, her eyes finally shifted, filled with panic and heartache. Song Yan was stunned as well, looking at the bloody cut on my brow, and then at how I was shielding Madame. A flicker of panic crossed his eyes.
Gu Yao, are you all right?
I ignored him. I simply crouched down and gently helped Madame up. Looking at the wounds on her back, I couldn't stop my tears from falling. Sister, how are you? Does it hurt? My lady shook her head, gently wiping the blood from my face. Her voice was faint.
I'm fine. Why are you so foolish? Why did you shield me?
Because you are my sister. I looked at my lady, word by word. I cannot just stand by and watch him punish you like this. Just then, Liu Pianpian's voice suddenly drifted in.
General, do not hurt concubine Gu.
I hadn't expected that it would be Liu Pianpian who called a stop to it.
She is carrying your child after all.
Supported by a maid, she stood at the entrance of the woodhouse, without the slightest hint of sorrow on her face, wearing an eerie smile instead. She walked up to me, raised her hand, and tilted up my chin, scrutinizing my face closely. Her icy fingertips touched my skin, making me feel a wave of nausea.
What a beautiful face.
Liu Pianpian smiled, yet her eyes were brimming with intense jealousy.
The child you bear should be very lovely too, right? The child will call the general father and call me mother.
How about that? In an instant, I understood Liu Pianpian's scheme. Having lost her child, she would likely find it difficult to conceive again, and I was pregnant with Song Yan's child. If anything happened to me, and the child could not be saved, she would lose all means of support. So she wanted me to give birth to this baby, and then snatch the child away, to raise as her own. That way, she would remain the most favored concubine in the general's manor, and still secure her position by relying on this child. My face turned pale. Looking at Liu Pianpian's hideous expression, a chill ran through my heart. If you let the madam go, the child in my womb will acknowledge you as its adoptive mother.
This child was meant to be mine anyway, Gu Yao.
Liu Pianpian suddenly tightened her grip.
You owe this to me.
I took a deep breath and slowly exhaled. Song Yan looked at me thoughtfully, then held Liu Pianpian's hand. Pianpian, be careful not to hurt our child. As he said those words, his eyes were fixed on my belly. This man had no heart at all. The only one he truly loved was himself. The madam will be driven into a corner by them. I had no other choice. I returned to my room and swept the clothes in the wardrobe onto the floor. Looking at what lay quietly at the very bottom, an embroidered pouch with inscribed words. I clutched it in my hand, summoned Hongyu, and told her to deliver it to the third prince's manor. Only then would the madam be saved. I sat in my room, eyes closed. My mother had been a famed courtesan renowned throughout the land. It took a fortune just to share a drink and conversation with her. Drawn by her fame, the third prince came. A dashing, elegant young prince. He captured my mother's heart. The third prince spent lavishly, asking only for an embroidered pouch made by her own hands. Just then, the emperor fell gravely ill. Before returning to the capital, the third prince made my mother a promise. The day the pouch was finished would be the day he came to marry her. My mother waited and waited, finished embroidering the pouch, and gave birth to me, without a husband. She never saw him return even until her dying breath. I sat in the room, waiting and waiting, and finally, the third prince arrived. It was not in vain that I kept that pouch with me every day. He had come on the pretext of visiting the general's manor. I stepped outside and ran right into him. The moment he saw me, his gaze froze. Seeing me, he must have understood everything, for I looked far too much like my mother. Tears streaming down my face, I fell to my knees before Song Yan. General, I beg you, spare the madam. The madam is innocent. Song Yan panicked slightly, terrified that domestic squabbles would hinder his promotion.
You senseless wretch, why come here to offend His Highness's sight?
He kicked me to the ground. I tried my best to shield my belly, yet a dull ache still flared up. I gritted my teeth and endured it. Saving the madam mattered most. A flicker of anger flashed across Prince Third's eyes, which he quietly suppressed. Then, turning to look at Song Yan with a faint smirk, he said,
It seems General Song's household is not quite at peace.
Hearing this, Song Yan bowed hastily and replied,
I am truly ashamed. It is merely petty squabbling among the womenfolk.
Let us not offend your highness's eyes.
She is with child after all. Why haven't you helped her up yet?
As soon as Prince Third spoke, Song Yan quickly helped me to my feet, yet the hand gripping my arm squeezed tightly, as if warning me not to utter a word I shouldn't.
What a coincidence. For I have taken a fancy to watching such spectacles lately.
Prince Third looked at Song Yan, clearly intending to meddle, just for the amusement. Left with no choice, Song Yan had to lead Prince Third to the woodshed, though he secretly sent word to Liu Pianpian. Thus, when the group arrived, Liu Pianpian and her maid were nowhere to be found, leaving only Madame lying on the ground, covered in bruises.
You are exceedingly audacious, General Song, to think you would use private torture against your principal wife within your own manor.
Prince Third's smile suddenly vanished. Though Song Yan had fought on countless battlefields, he was terrified into a cold sweat by this display. On the battlefield, one only needed to slay enemies. The court was filled with unseen struggles. One never knew when or whom one might offend, and lose one's entire future. What is more, Prince Third was the reigning emperor's closest younger brother. If he wished to make life difficult for Song Yan, all it took was a few negative words before the emperor.
Your Highness may not be aware. This woman possesses an utterly vicious heart. She harmed the nearly full-term child in my concubine's womb.
Seeing that he could no longer hide the truth, Song Yan hastily pushed Madame forward to take the blame. Seeming quite intrigued,
Is your concubine not doing fine?
Song Yan waved his hand, ordering someone to summon Liu Pianpian. I quickly signaled Hong Yu, telling her to fetch a physician. After half an incense stick's time, only then did Liu Pianpian slowly walk over, supported by her maid. Presumably, dealing with the bloodstains had delayed her a bit. The third prince sat chair, saying,
You certainly took your time.
Looking at the frail Liu Pianpian kneeling on the ground, he showed no intention of letting her rise.
Your Highness might not know. This concubine just lost her child, so my movements are somewhat slow. Please forgive me, Your Highness.
Liu Pianpian made up an excuse to gloss over it, so the third prince could not press the matter further. He was seen looking at Liu Pianpian with great interest.
You say she harmed the child in your womb. Do you have evidence?
Replying to Your Highness, this concubine ate the pastries sent by the madam, and only then lost my child. Afterwards, I also had someone test them, and there was indeed safflower in the pastries without a doubt.
Liu Pianpian naturally had no idea why the third prince had come to the general's manor, or why he was interfering in this matter. Yet, with royal authority prevailing, so she had no choice but to answer obediently.
You say there is safflower in the pastries. Who knows if you put it in yourself?
The third prince indeed understood the inner courtyard tricks thoroughly. With a single guess, he hit upon the truth of the matter.
Your Highness, please see clearly.
Liu Pianpian was so frightened that her face turned pale.
I would never harm my own flesh and blood.
She kowtowed to the third prince.
We were merely stating our own suspicion. Why are you so agitated? Men, go investigate. Who in the general's manor has bought safflower recently?
The third prince waved his hand and gave the order. While waiting for the results, Hong Yu also brought the physician over. I immediately had him examine Madame's injuries. Liu Pianpian looked toward us, her eyes filled with resentment. But with the third prince before her, she dared not cause trouble. The third prince's efficiency was very high. He soon found the evidence I had long prepared.
Concubine Liu, even a vicious tiger doesn't eat its cubs.
The third prince hurled the evidence at Liu Pianpian, pronouncing her guilt without allowing any argument. Take her away and hand her over to the authorities. Liu Pianpian looked at me, desperately trying to say something. The third prince made a subtle gesture, and Liu Pianpian was dragged away by his men, silenced forever. My eyes rolled back, and I fainted, after such a severe ordeal. Thankfully, the third prince summoned an imperial physician, who managed to save my baby. As for Liu Pianpian, no one would oppose the third prince for a mere niece, so her death was quietly buried. Where is Madame?
Madame is badly injured. Her parents came to the general's manor upon hearing the news. They took away her dowry and are taking Madame back with them, refusing to let her stay and suffer such mistreatment from the general.
A flicker of envy showed in Xinger's eyes. I had heard about her background. Her family had 5 children, and her parents sold all 4 daughters just to raise the long-awaited son. When you find someone you love in the future, I will be your family. Stop thinking about parents who never cared for you. Why keep them in your heart? Singer looked at me with teary eyes. I patted her head and asked her to help me walk over to see Madame. Arriving at the door of Madame's room, I saw a richly dressed man pointing at Song Yan in pure fury.
Is this how you ruin my precious daughter?
The woman wiping tears beside him bore a strong resemblance to Madame. She must be Madame's mother.
Calm down, in-laws. Please calm down. This is my fault. For letting Ting Ting suffer. I promise to make it up to her in the future.
The old dowager showed none of her usual arrogance toward Madam.
I swear on my old life.
She smiled ingratiatingly. Of course she wouldn't let Madam leave. This old crone always wanted her son to marry a high-ranking official's daughter, yet her entire family lived off my lady's maiden family. She truly took shamelessness to the absolute extreme.
Blame you? My daughter has been tormented by you like this. How dare I leave her with you any longer? No matter what, I am taking my daughter away today.
The man's attitude was resolute. As he spoke, he moved to open my lady's door.
Father-in-law, it was my fault.
Song Yan, who had not uttered a single word, silent until now, Song Yan suddenly fell with a thud to his knees before the man.
It was that detestable Liu Pianpian who blinded your son-in-law's eyes. I beg father-in-law and mother-in-law to give me one more chance. I swear from now on I will treat.
Mu Ting's mother might not have thought of it, but Song Yan definitely did. If Mu Ting were taken away in this state, by tomorrow morning, word of him favoring a concubine and mistreating his wife would spread through every street and alley, making it difficult for him to climb higher in the future.
Get out of my way.
Madam's father tried to step around Song Yan, but Song Yan blocked him, preventing him from passing.
Have you no shame at all?
Amid the angry scolding, the room door was violently pushed open. A glimmer of light flashed in Song Yan's eyes, yet the old madam was even quicker than he was. Ting Ting, she rushed in front of Madam, tightly grabbed her hands, and cried,
Quickly tell your parents that you won't leave. It was all my fault in the past. I'm apologizing to you right here.
The words of apology came from the old madam's mouth. There wasn't a trace of sincerity on her face. She only wanted to keep Madam here, to keep the general's Manor's god of wealth here.
Father, mother, I am not leaving. I want to stay here.
As Madam spoke, her eyes were fixed directly on me. I knew she didn't want me to suffer alone in the general's manor. Yet for two people trapped in such a dire place, if even one could escape, it would still be a blessing. Madam was different, after all. She still had parents who loved her, an exceptional family background, and Song Yan. After the divorce, her future would be bright.
Have you lost your mind? Beaten like this, and you say you won't leave.
Tinger, I knew you still had feelings for me.
Song Yan looked deeply moved, though it was impossible to tell if it was sincere or fake.
All right, as an old married couple, let's not make a scene like this. It is enough that you realize your mistake. Quickly follow mother to appease my parents. They are furious right now.
Madam looked down at her hand, held by Song Yan, a flash of disgust in her eyes.
Gu Yao, what are you doing standing there? Come here quickly, Madam gestured to me,
waving her hand with a gentle smile. My eyes stung with tears. Sister, it is all my fault for bringing you to this state.
How can I blame you? I only have myself to blame for being blind.
Madam sighed.
And loving the wrong person.
Sister, you should leave. This general's manor is a miserable place. Someone as innocent as Madam would be plotted against here, utterly defenseless. I'm all alone in this world, so it doesn't matter to me.
If I leave, what will happen to you? You're still carrying a child.
My lady's gentle voice echoed in my ears, like fireworks bursting in my mind. My lady raised her hand and gently stroked my hair, just like my mother did when she was alive. I narrowed my eyes comfortably. My lady's parents had left, yet they had a backup plan. The gold and jewels they took back were never returned, and the monthly allowance was given directly to Madam on time. The people of the general's estate were used to spending Madam's money, living lavishly. Song Yan's monthly stipend was not even enough to support his other women. Whenever someone in the manor wanted to host a banquet or spend money, they had no choice but to ask Madam for it. I, on the other hand, fared quite well. Pampered by Madam, I had only the very best of everything. On the eve of giving birth, Madam had nourished me until I was quite plump. During this time, the third prince also came to see me, hoping to ask about my mother. The departed are gone. What use is guilt now? I passed my mother's words on to him. What was promised, Shir has already given. May your highness be blessed with many children, and live in peace and prosperity. Seeing the third prince as he is now, he has indeed fulfilled my mother's wishes. I described my mother's final days to him. Watching him in such agonizing grief was the only thing that brought me satisfaction. I simply cannot bear to see him living well. I am about to give birth. Waves of sharp pain tore through my belly, as if tearing me completely apart.
Keep going. Push harder.
Song Yan waited outside for the outcome, believing it unseemly for a man to enter the delivery room. Was he not born in a delivery room himself? I gritted my teeth, holding my breath. After struggling for a long while with the birth of the child,
It is a boy. Go tell the general quickly.
A wave of relief washed over me. The midwife rushed out excitedly with the baby to claim her reward. The Song family has an heir. Overjoyed, Song Yan rewarded the midwife handsomely. Madam tapped my forehead gently with her finger. I pouted. acting playfully petulant. Madam, please bring the baby over. I haven't even had a good look at him yet. Sister, we have a son. Madam leaned down, teasing the little one in her arms together with me. When the child turned 3, Songyan began to have new ambitions. He fulfilled the old madam's wish by climbing the social ladder. The widowed eldest princess took a liking to him. I bribed a servant from the princess's manor and gathered some information. Rumor had it they had been seeing each other in secret for a long time, and Songyan had proposed marriage to the eldest princess multiple times. Yet the princess had never relented. She was an imperial princess. How could she possibly be a concubine? My lady was merely a merchant's daughter. If the eldest princess were to marry in, she would inevitably have to make way for her. I watched Sheer, wearing a little vest, running and playing in the courtyard. My thoughts drifted away.
Mother, what are you thinking about?
She opened her little hands and waved them in front of my eyes. Madam was already frail, unable to bear such roughhousing. Madam smiled gently, holding Sheer, her face full of doting affection. It is fine, I said helplessly, yet my heart softened too. Sister, you spoil her too much. Seeing Madam like this made me even more determined to protect her. Just the Prime Minister's niece had already cost Madam half her life. If the Grand Princess were to come as well, how could we ever live in peace? I said softly, Sister, my legs feel a bit numb. I'd like to take a walk around. I stood up, turned a few corners, and headed to the kitchen. Songyuan's medicine was brewing inside. His health had suffered in recent years, and he was deeply depleted, relying entirely on these decoctions for recovery. While no one was looking, I reached over the medicine pot, ready to scrape the powder from beneath my nails, when someone suddenly grabbed my wrist tightly.
What are you doing here?
I looked up at Madam, my face full of the panic of being caught in the act. Madam gave me a subtle pinch, and only then did I steady my nerves. I came to see if the general's medicine is ready, so I can bring it to him while it is hot.
This medicine needs to simmer longer to be effective.
Madam yanked me into an adjacent room.
If you're so idle, she pulled me along to wash my hands thoroughly. Then stay and talk with me.
The madam reprimanded softly, her tone full of worry.
Gu Yao, haste makes waste. If you truly tampered with it, even the third prince wouldn't be able to protect you.
I've had plans for this all along. I was cut off by the madam. She carefully explained the intricacies to me. It turned out that the medicinal tonics Songyan was drinking could only boost his energy temporarily, while in fact severely depleting his vital essence. Over time, the more tonics he took, the weaker he would become, until the damage was irreversible. We only need to wait quietly and watch him reap what he has sown. Songyan did not disappoint our expectations. Before he could even marry the eldest princess, his health collapsed first. Seeing that he was of no use to her, the eldest princess severed all ties with him at once, casting him aside completely. Unwilling to accept this, Songyan secretly increased his dosage, which ultimately left him paralyzed in bed, in need of constant care. Feeling his quarters brought bad luck, the madam had him moved to the secluded courtyard where he was once confined. When the old madam learned of this, she pointed at the madam and cursed her for being heartless and cold-blooded. I simply had the old madam sent over there as well, letting her attend to her own son personally. Presumably, she would be more than willing. Out of sight, out of mind, without Songyan and the old madam stirring up trouble. Madam and I lived an increasingly comfortable life. When Sheer turned 7 years old, the third prince fell gravely ill. By the time the third princess consort found us, he was terminally ill and did not have much time left. All these years, the third prince had sent Sheer many gifts, both openly and secretly. Sheer had been close to him since childhood and wept by his bedside, more genuinely than his own biological sons. The third prince lay on the sickbed.
I thought about coming to find you.
He tightly clutched the embroidered pouch my mother had made.
But the emperor said, if I ever saw her, it would mean her death. Yet in the end, she still passed away.
Listening to Sheer's weeping, anger surged within my heart. All because of you. I knew I shouldn't say such harsh words to a dying man. Maybe my mother was willing to bear it all. Yet all the suffering over those years makes it impossible for me to stay calm. I looked around and saw the third prince's children and grandchildren gathered around his bed. It truly lived up to the saying, blessed with many children, and a peaceful, smooth life. But what about my mother? She held on to a single promise and waited bitterly for half her life, only to meet such a tragic end.
It was my fault. So the heavens punished me.
His eyes were clouded, already losing their focus. He looked at me, his gaze filled with yearning. I knew what he wanted to say, nothing more than begging for my forgiveness, and hoping to hear me call him father. But my father died back in that year of famine. all the wandering and hardships of my life, the bitterness I've endured, and the suffering I've borne, make it impossible for me, on behalf of my younger self, to utter the words of forgiveness, let alone call him father. Tears welled up in the third prince's eyes, as he continued looking at me, expectantly. I clutched Shear's hand so tightly, my knuckles turned white, my fingertips trembling. Yet in the end, I still couldn't bring myself to say it. The third prince's breathing grew weaker and weaker, and the light in his eyes faded further. Just then, Shear squeezed his emaciated, skeletal hand.
Grandfather!
A sudden spark of light gathered in the third prince's eyes. He raised his hand and lovingly stroked Shear's head, and then it dropped limply, his breath gone, until the very end. His hand was still clutching that embroidered pouch tightly. His followers wished to bury him together with my mother, but I firmly refused. My mother had long been buried with my father, and he, after all, belonged in the imperial mausoleum. Madam's mother had already taken me in as her goddaughter, and Madam and I had become true sisters. I have met Xing'er's sweetheart. He is an honest and decent young man, and sincere to others. I prepared a generous dowry for her, and married her off with great fanfare. Her husband treated her exceptionally well, and their life was full of peace and joy. Later, she gave birth to a daughter, who looked just like her. As the girl grew older, she became even more lovable, and Shear always loved playing with his little sister. My lady smiled, and said to me,
"Why not arrange a childhood betrothal for Shear and Xing'er's daughter?"
I smiled and shook my head. Matters of the heart shouldn't be decided so hastily. It is far too early to tell. Why worry about such things now? It would be better to take them to see the desert snowstorms, or the misty rains of Jiangnian when the chance comes. The year Shear turned 9, Songyan passed away in that separate courtyard. He and Shear had little contact to begin with. Shear had little affection for him. The tears he shed were fewer than when the third prince passed away.
Go prepare the funeral arrangements.
Madam was kind-hearted after all. She had someone procure a coffin for Songyan, and provided money so he could have a decent burial. Songyan's mother was left with no one to rely on, having neither power nor influence, yet possessing a sharp tongue. The household servants often bullied her. My lady and I simply turned a blind eye. Wicked people will be tormented by their own kind. She deserved all of it. Days flashed by, and Shear gradually grew up, falling in love with a young lady of his own. Xing'er's daughter had also blossomed into adulthood, and married into a fine family. Whenever the peaches ripened, Xing'er would always have a basket sent to us, filled with sweet peaches. The bond between our two families was never severed. Taking a single bite, it was utterly sweet, sweet to the very core of my heart. Tasting these sweet peaches, looking at my wife with her gentle smile beside me, and seeing Shear growing up healthy and strong, I felt that although this life was full of turmoil and bitterness, the clouds had finally parted to reveal the moonlight, making this life truly worthwhile.